How's it going on, everybody? This is Jake Gibson, and welcome to episode 127 of the Shula Bowl podcast. I think we have another great episode on tap, everyone. It starts off with Kevin Burrell and his thoughts on FIU's loss to the Fighting Blue Hens of Delaware at Pit Bull Stadium. He shares his thoughts about that loss as well as expectations as FIU enters their first bye week of the season as they get ready to take on UConn later on. Now, speaking of bye weeks, that's what Florida Atlantic's coming out of. So Kevin Fielder shares his thoughts about that, what he hopes to see his team evolve with as they get ready for a real tough contest against one of the better teams in the American, the Memphis Tigers. So without further ado, let's check it out, starting off with the FIU perspective. How is it going, everybody? Welcome to the Shula Bowl podcast, and we are starting off this episode talking with Kevin Burrell as he gets us informed about what in the world happened over at Pit Bull Stadium on that fateful day as they take the L against the Delaware Blue Hens. But we hope you all will have an enjoyable episode 127. But Kevin, unfortunately, we have to start off with some bad news here. It's a disappointing loss, I'm guessing you're feeling. 38-16 against those Fighting Blue Hens. So off the rip, I got to tell you, a lot of people on social saying this is a Shula Bowl hangover. I needed to incorporate the Shula Bowl somehow. We are in the Shula Bowl pod after all. Do you see it that way? Was it as simple as they were not ready for the Blue Hens? They may have overlooked the Blue Hens. Were they still reeling off of taking down those bullies from Boca? Or is there more to it than just that?
I think there's a little more to it than just that. Of course, I do think the Shula Bowl hangover aspect of it is fair. It's true. They're coming off one of the biggest wins since 2019, in my opinion, against when they beat the University of Miami. But yeah, 100%. I mean, look, Delaware's a good team. There's no denying that. They played a great game against UConn. They kept it close with Colorado, beat Delaware State. They're 3-1. They're off to a great start at the FBS level. They had a lot of experience on the roster. And a lot of people had a good feeling that Delaware would be a sneaky team. So given that, of course, I'm not surprised Delaware outplayed FIU. I'm surprised they beat FIU, but it was a lot more of a blowout than it should have been. FIU, just bad decision-making from Kewan Jenkins with 2 interceptions. I looked back at the first one a couple days ago, and he just straight up did not see the cornerback come in and make the play, and he probably underthrew that a little bit. It was just not a good read for him. And then the second interception was just straight up a bomb up to the air and hoping and praying that McGuire Anderson would have made the catch, and he just didn't. It was bad. It was a bad decision. That one was poor decision making on that end. So, yes, tough game for FIU. Credit to Delaware. They played a great game. Very creative style of offense that they had. So a lot of credit goes to them and what they did because Nick Minicucci, Joe Silver, Duplessis, they had a good game, and so did LaBoy, who had the 2 receiving touchdowns. So a lot of credit to them. Willie was pretty open about the game itself after. He said he got outcoached. So outplayed, and there needs to be a lot of self-assessing following this game because it's one of those games that you really shouldn't have lost. You should have been 3-1 going into the bye, feeling good about yourself going into the UConn game. But I think at some point, every new coaching staff needs a humbling moment. It came against FAU. It came against FIU for FAU, and I think Kevin would agree. Maybe even as early as the Maryland game. Who knows? But for FIU, definitely came against this Delaware team. So tough one, definitely super tough. Doesn't really do much for you future-wise, right? Because Delaware not able to participate in the Conference USA Championship game. But who knows if it does have bowl implications for FIU at the end. Like you look, FIU finishes 5-7. Crap, we could have beat Delaware. But
who knows? I don't even think it's fair to say that losses to power conference teams early in the season are your humbling moments. I'm not going to say they're expected, but you kind of had to have a feeling that that's not the games you're 100% going to. You 100% feel like you should win, unlike this game for FIU against Delaware, because a certain someone who wears glasses caught some flack in a post-game show for saying that FIU had a better overall roster than the Fighting Blue Hens of Delaware from the Delaware faithful. And the person that said that stands by that comment, I heard, according to a source. So I'll turn it over to you, Kevin. Do you agree with this mysterious person who said that FIU still has the better roster than the Delaware Blue Hens? It just didn't all add up for this game specifically.
I think you were right, and it is you.
Who? Huh?
Shut up. You're right.
Just the neutral host.
I do agree. FIU does have the better overall roster, just didn't show up that day. In reality, I do think that Delaware is better than FAU. I will stand by that. You can tell Kevin.
Okay.
I think they're a better team. I think Delaware was just extremely creative the way that they played, and they really just outcoached FIU. There's no other way to put it. On both sides of the ball, Delaware was the better team that day, but I think FIU is the better team overall. Yes.
Okay, so we need to talk about lights, about Kiwan. 203 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. More interceptions than touchdowns in the game is always a big no-no. This was the preseason Offensive Player of the Year in Conference USA, and so far, Kevin, I don't think he's come close to those standards just yet. What does he really need to change in his game plan moving forward against what is going to be tougher competition in the conference coming up, and even the non-con game against UConn, to really change the direction of the season he's having and get to those new heights that he is expected to get to this season?
Usually in these instances, you blame the O-line, right? But that really hasn't been the case at all. They've actually been pretty good. They're giving him enough time to make plays, and I think teams are just playing FIU a little bit differently than years past. They know who Kiwan is now. They know he's the preseason Offensive Player of the Year. They know that FIU was a team that really aired out the ball quite a bit last year. They know that they've always had a big-time receiver. It's kind of like wide receiver you, right? Eric Rivers. You had Chris Mitchell, Tyrese Chambers. So they know the history behind it. They know, but this is a different coaching staff. And regardless, it's been tough to air it out. I mean, the run game has certainly opened the passing game, but the passing game hasn't excelled. It hasn't been good. So it's certainly been a tough ride. So yes, tough for Kiwan. Decision-making needs to be a lot better than it has been in years past. Or actually, no, it just has to be better overall. It hasn't been good decision making. There's certain games that you pinpoint as to last year, like, man, Kiwan, had he made a better decision, you would have had a different situation. And that kind of was the case with Delaware, right? And another thing with Kiwan is that he still hasn't shown the comeback factor, the big drive factor yet, in my opinion. Kiwan, I think, is a great quarterback. I think he's a good quarterback. He could be a great quarterback. And he still hasn't shown the ability to be a great quarterback. And he still hasn't used the full ability of being a dual threat guy that moves well in the pocket. He showed quite a bit of it against FAU, where he really made some big runs. But if you don't have an option and you go through your progressions and you don't find the right read, you got to run, because you have to find some yardage somehow. And by the time that you are making all your progressions, you don't see the read, you got to run, because if not, you're going to get sacked. And that was the case quite a couple times last week against Delaware, where he just couldn't find the read, couldn't find the guy, and he got sacked. Happened on the 2-point conversion, happened on the final drive of the game, and it happened right before the half. He got sacked a couple times, probably the worst performance by the O-line this season, just given the amount of times he was sacked. They were able to run the ball well, but yeah, tough season so far for Kiwan. He has more interceptions than passing touchdowns, which is an issue. Crazy enough, though, there are players in CUSA with like 6 interceptions, 5 interceptions. So he's not like the worst quarterback in the conference by far, by any means, but he certainly has struggled given the expectations. And were expectations set a little bit too high for Kiwan going into the season? Probably, but I think that's because no one really thought that the run game would be what it has been. So I think Kiwan has gotten some sort of pass so far, just given, hey, you saw 4 rushing touchdowns, the run game's gotten it going. Like, there's reason to think like there's a world where he has a mediocre year, but still passes because you make a bowl game. And if you have a 4-8 season, we're having a completely different conversation.
Moving on over to defense now. Would you say that FIU's secondary, the way they performed against Delaware, is a great indication, maybe to scouts of NFL teams, on how important a guy like Brian Blades is to this team? When you don't have him and you see what they've given up on both defense and especially special teams to the Fighting Blue Hens, that's just a good indication of how important Blades is to this program, is it not?
Yeah, for sure. Blades, him being out was certainly a tough loss, but you would have thought, like, and this is kind of the thought process I had going into the game where, yeah, you lose Blades, but you have good depth that you could help you regardless. Ashton Levels, Victor Evans, Javion Celestine, Mr. Clark, Jack Thompson, Preston Thompson, I'm sorry. Like, you have guys who you thought were good enough to hold it up. And unfortunately, it just wasn't the case. Ashton Levels has really struggled. Victor Evans had the PI call, so did Ashton Levels. Mr. Clark had one, I believe. So did Preston Thompson towards the end of the game. There's a lot of unnecessary penalties that eventually led to scoring drives for the Blue Hens. And you need Brian Blades. And even on the special teams aspect, which I know we'll talk about at some point, so I'll just bring it up now to make Kevin talk a little bit more about the Memphis Tigers. We're going to beat FAU on Saturday on ESPN2.
Is that right?
Is that Brian Blades is the gunner on special teams. The FIU has already allowed 2 blocked punts, one against Penn State, one against FAU. Now against Delaware, they allow a punt return touchdown by Kyron Duplessis, who was one of the best wide receivers in the conference so far. He ended up winning Conference USA Special Teams Player of the Week with a punt return touchdown. And Brian Blades, Willie was pretty open about that too. Like, Brian Blades would have made that tackle 10 times out of 10. There are 5 guys in Biscayne blue, as he noted, standing right in front of the guy, and none of them made the tackle. That can't happen. So Brian Blades' loss was not only noticeable on defense in the pass game, which FIU continues to struggle with their pass defense, but continues to also be a big loss on special teams where you would have seen one less touchdown in the game and maybe a little bit of a different situation towards the end of that game.
So, how devastated were you after that loss? You've seen some tough L's that FIU has given up over the years, but considering the circumstances, Delaware certainly seems like one of the better teams in Conference USA in their first season at FBS, which is funny. And the fact that it's still early in the season, it's the first year of the Willie Simmons era, but regardless, where does this loss stack up as far as devastation for you?
I was really mad after the game because it was one of those games where I felt like FIU really should have won. Like, those are not a must win, but really it's a team they feel like you're better than. You should have beat. It's home. You had the odds all on your side and you lost. And I'm not going to go, it's going to be one of the worst losses. There have been much worse. But the way that this team played, the way that Q1 played, the way that this game went, FIU got outcoached, and there's no other way to put it. So it was a tough one for sure.
So now we're entering a bye week, Kevin. FIU is 2-2. If I told you before the season started that the Panthers would have 2 wins and 2 losses under their belt before this first bye week, would you have been okay with that? Or would you have been like, man, it should be 3-1, or are you more like, thank God we're not 1-3, or somehow winless entering this first bye?
No, I'm not surprised. I expected 2-2. I think at the end of the, UConn's obviously a big one, where that kind of not sways your season, but certainly a game where you have to go out there and hopefully perform and maintain a 500 or above record. And I think that's what at the end of the day needs to happen. So 2-2, expected. Now, did I expect the second loss to be? Did I expect them to lose to Delaware? No. I expected 3-1 at that point, the way the season had gone. But things happen, and unfortunately, FIU fell to Delaware. But a 3-2 record going into the second bye week would be pretty cool, and that's what they need, right? Because then you look at 3 wins, and I see 3 wins on the schedule after that to get to 6.
Do you see, assuming that that's an L against, what is a very good UConn team moving forward? Do you see 4 wins after that to get to 6?
Yes.
Kennesaw,
Sam Houston, Middle Tennessee, Missouri State. There's your 4.
Even Liberty now looks like if they don't.
But let's just assume that's a loss, right?
It will be homecoming, and I don't know. Liberty has pulled up
FIU
a lot of
sucks. I mean, unfortunately, as crazy as it is, FIU sucks on homecoming.
They do.
Last year, the year before that, and the year before that.
I think there was a big difference between last year and this year in one specific area of the team, though. So we'll see how Simmons rallies the troops on homecoming this time around. So what's the biggest thing that you think FIU should be doing with this week off? Just obviously getting healthy is probably number one. I get that. But aside from that, what are some of the biggest reality checks, wake-up calls, look in the mirror type systems that you think this Panthers team should really be doing while they have some time to rest before that UConn game?
It's that, right? Getting healthy. I think that's the biggest thing. Down Brian Blades, down Percy Courtney Jr., down Juju Lewis. All three hopefully expected to be back by the UConn game. I for sure know Blades will be back. Percy Courtney is expected to be back. Juju Lewis is still on the fence. Maybe you'll have to wait until the Western Kentucky game. But if Juju Lewis is back for UConn, that's huge, because the other thing that you need to assess is wide receiver room and who's actually going to be someone that's going to help you down the line. FIU struggled on that sense, and I think now would be a pretty good time to really assess your receivers, who you want to use, because you can't be using as many guys as they have been and expect, someone like Kiwan to, I don't know, find more success. I think you need to keep it to a certain amount of guys, and Juju Lewis is going to be one of those. And he's a big target, really has been solid in the games that he has played so far. So the hope is that he could get that going once again when he returns, and he'll be huge for conference play, especially against teams like Western Kentucky, who have gotten off to a really nice start.
So we'll talk a bit more about this next week once we get a little bit closer to this UConn game. But this isn't going to be like a couple of years ago when FIU walked into East Hartford and kind of just took over against the Huskies. So again, we'll talk a bit more about this next week. But what's the one thing you really got to watch out for with this Huskies team that FIU should definitely take some notes more than anything about during this week off?
The passing game. UConn's one of the best passing offenses in the country. I think they're top 15, top 20. They have a really good receiver in Skylar Bell, their top guy. Joe Fagnano, who was really good for them. I think FIU fans may remember that name. He was the quarterback for Maine, but ended up being out for that game. So they ended up going with Drew Robertson, who ended up being the quarterback in Monmouth, who beat FIU. So, every once in a while, that's just one of the names I remember, just given he was supposed to start against FIU, didn't do it. But Fagnano's a really solid quarterback. He got another year because he was kind of on the fence if he would return or not. And Jim Morris teams have been pretty good. So UConn made the Fenway Bowl last year, beat UNC, a really depleted UNC team at that point. But yes, this is a very tough task for FIU. Yeah. UConn's been a really good team so far, regardless of the record, because they've been a little bit more disappointing. Like, you lose to Delaware, you keep it very close with Ball State, a really bad team. You go to OT with Syracuse, you'll take that result. But yeah, there have been some interesting losses for this UConn team so far. Both of them in OT, so they're a good team that's been just a tad bit disappointing this year. I can't speak much to their defense. I haven't really done a lot of research. I'm kind of just taking this week off. It's certainly a tough opponent for FIU.
Any final thoughts on what transpired this past Saturday and what this week off means to you, Kevin Barral? You can lock in on Marlins content as they try to make that playoff push undisturbed. Yes,
exactly. Go on Marlins mode this week, and maybe I'll drop a quick FIU article, but that's about it.
Alrighty then. Well, that was the FIU segment. Let's go check in on Kevin Fielder, see what he's doing as his Florida Atlantic Owls get ready to take on the Memphis Tigers. Oof. Good luck with that. And welcome back to the Shula Bowl pod. Now it's time to talk about the well-rested Florida Atlantic Owls as they get set for one of the toughest matchups of the season in the Memphis Tigers. Now, joining me, of course, is Kevin Fielder, our FAU representative. And Kevin, I'm not asking for any more owl fun facts, but I mean, if you have any that you,
I don't have any. I didn't come prepared with any this week.
Okay, good. Because I said you didn't have to, but I was like, oh, maybe Kevin has one or two more that he didn't. Maybe he didn't have enough time for in the last episode. But maybe it's the Owls who have the last laugh now, seeing what happened for the FIU Panthers against Delaware.
Maybe. I think the good thing is that only one of those teams had to play this week. So it was a lot easier for me to not necessarily hate watch, but not have to worry about FAU for a week because I will be honest, the Shula Bowl loss left a sour taste in my mouth that it's still not really gone away. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm still frustrated about how that game went. I'm still frustrated about how they played. I'm at the point now where I kind of need them to play a football game against another opponent, because I just need to make sure that game doesn't exist anymore in my mind.
Yeah, hate watch is a strong term, I would say. I mean, like if I were to ask Kevin Barral if he's hate watching this upcoming game, well, he'd probably say yes, but that's besides the point. But regardless, the Owls had the week off to get rest, to recover from some potential injuries the team was dealing with. I know a lot of guys went down for the Owls in that Shula Bowl game. So just talk about where you think this team is in general as far as health and as far as willingness to continue this season, because there's still a whole lot of college football left to be played.
Yeah, they definitely had some guys get banged up in the Shula Bowl and sort of have nicks and bruises, but Zach Kitley didn't make it seem like there was any major injuries that's going to hamper a guy being able to play the rest of the year or play at a high level, right? And so I think the bye week comes at the perfect time for that, because it allows those guys to get rested right before conference play starts. And now the games really do count, right? Like the non-conference games, they still count, right? You're still trying to make a bowl game, but these games count a little bit more, I think. And now for FAU, it's just finding a way to put it all together. And that's sort of really been the major focal point of Kitley's sort of addresses to the media and stuff, right? Like it's been, he understands that what happened at the Shula Bowl shouldn't have happened. It was disappointing that it happened, that's not the standard that they put onto themselves. Now they get a chance to prove it all again against a really good Memphis team at home. I know we were talking about it. They're like 13.5-point underdogs at home, which is a truly baffling stat that you don't see often in college football. But still, it's another game. Any given Saturday, I guess, to some degree still exists in college football. And so all you need is one good game. And that's all FAU really needs is one good game. And I think this fan base has an entirely different tune heading into the rest of the year.
So another interesting thing we talked about leading up to the Shula Bowl was how Kitley and a lot of the guys were not, they weren't sort of taking the game not necessarily as a rivalry, but something that, like, they were just treating it as another game. Well, now that the game is coming past, do you think now it's basically previewing what we can expect from the Owls next Shula Bowl come around next season? But how do you think they view the rivalry now that they're finally on the losing end of it?
I don't think their approach has changed. I think that they're still going to treat it as just another game because, again, like we sort of talked about 2 weeks ago in that episode, right? Like, I think to some degree, if you start introducing more hype to something, then it becomes a little bit more than just a football game, right? And you prepare for things differently. You're just a little bit more nervous, right? Like Kitley's approach this year has really been like, hey, it's just another game. Like the Maryland game early in the year, just another game. FAMU, just another game, right? You're just playing 12 football games. And I don't think that's necessarily the worst approach because this team really just needs to find a way to get back on track. It needs to find a way to find something consistent on offense and defense. And they haven't had that yet, but there's been bright moments and bright flashes, but those flashes have been few and far between. And so I'm still not necessarily against the whole, any given Saturday, just kind of play out there, play your game and hope things work, right? Like don't put added stress onto the game, especially when you're playing a team like Memphis, who just got done playing an incredibly spirited game at home against Arkansas where they had to force a fumble late to secure the win. Like this is a good Memphis team. They're receiving AP top 25 votes for a reason, but you can't treat them as Goliath. They're just another football team that you have to play.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely a good point. But next season, will FAU now refer to FIU as them, like the Panthers were to the Owls? Like, do you think?
I think they should do that every year. So
okay, yeah, no, I like that. Like I said, you need to cross out the A's and the I's on the campus for both sides. So, stay lobby here. What was the biggest thing you feel like the team needed to look in the mirror and realize during this week off leading up to not just the Memphis game, but the rest of the season?
It's consistency. It's been consistency all year because we even saw it in the FIU game 2 weeks ago, right? Where they had moments where they were able to drive down the field and put together a consistent offense and, have chunk plays and explosive plays, but they were never consistent. They struggled to get to third and short. They struggled to get into advantageous positions for the offense. And so I think really the biggest thing is they just have to find a way to get a more consistent game plan in place, a more consistent offense in place. Likewise, on defense, they have to find a better way of stopping quarterback run, stopping, the running game in general. They struggled with that last week. It was not an issue against Maryland, but it became an issue against FIU. And a lot of that was gap integrity. A lot of that was just sort of understanding your lanes, not trying to become a hero. And so I think like the biggest thing on both sides of the ball is they just need to find consistency. On offense, especially, you can't just rely on 40-yard plays every time to develop an offense. That's going to leave you sort of high and dry for a lot of the game. And so they need to find ways to just sustain drives, and not talking 15-play drives, but like you need more 8-play drives. You need more 9-play drives where the defense can get off the field and your offense can just put something together.
And so, well, we mentioned health earlier, but I mean, as far as changes to play calling on either side of the ball, you don't think that anything like that's going to get a major refresher coming off the loss to FIU leading up to this game, do you?
No, I think the biggest thing is they're just going to look at how they've approached things and looked at how they've called plays and what plays they're calling in certain situations or things like that. They're not going to go tear it all down and go rebuild it in week 3 of the season. I think that the main focus right now is just like, what have we done wrong and where can we go from here? And it's just sort of the self-evaluation, self-reflecting part of this. It's not the try and find a problem or a solution to every problem. It's just finding a way to see what the process looks like, because Zach Kittley's going to remain the play caller all year. Brett Dewhurst is going to remain the play caller all year. Like that feels pretty set in stone. And I think a lot of the personnel will remain the same for most of the season. It's just finding a way to maximize that personnel and where you want to put them so that your entire game plan is where it needs to be.
Okay. So any final thoughts on this past week? Any more soul searching that maybe had to be done with some players specifically that you feel like they needed the break more than others?
I think it's the running game, because they've struggled passing the ball. And Caden Feldkamp, I think, also needs just a reset from having to play, because, the last few weeks have not gone the way that I think anyone in Boca Raton expected it to for the quarterback. But also, they're not running the ball well either. They're bottom like 10 or 15 in rushing success as an offense right now. And it's really difficult to win any game if you can't run the football. It's really difficult to sustain drives if you can't run the football. And so the biggest thing, right, is you need to figure out a way to find a consistent running game and put yourself in situations where it's not 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 8. And, Caden Feldkamp has to go out there and make a play. You want to be able to keep the defense on its toes. You want to force them to have to focus on the run. Those cliches that you hear on every broadcast remain true, right? Like you need to find a way to have them focusing on the run. And right now, teams don't respect FAU running the football because they haven't given them a reason to.
So health-wise, you think the Owls are going to be good to go for Memphis?
Yes.
There's no major position that I feel like most positions at FAU have depth already, but there's not one position that you really feel like injuries won't be hammering them for this Memphis matchup.
Yeah, there's nothing that seems to be a major concern in terms of injuries. And so I think it's just kind of the bumps and bruises that come with playing a football season.
I gotcha. So, all right, now we transition to the Memphis Tigers, who are heading to Boca Raton. Looking at their record, 4-0. They've dropped at the minimum 28 points against everyone so far this season, including a shocker against the Arkansas Razorbacks, which strangely was not even at Fayetteville. It was at Memphis, which is fascinating when these power conference teams go to Group of Five schools. So just in general, what are your thoughts on Memphis, and does this scream trap game to you?
Maybe. I mean, it's always difficult to come off of a game like that, and I think FIU saw that last week. It's really difficult to ride the high of a rivalry win. It's really difficult to ride the high of a win against a P4 opponent. And Memphis, to their credit, had to pretty much take all the blood from the stone, per se, to try and figure out a way to win that game. They had to stretch to the final seconds to win that game. And, Arkansas had a chance to kick the game-winning field goal, and a fumble recovery by Memphis in the red zone sort of secured them the win, right? Like, they had to play a dang near perfect game to beat Memphis or to beat Arkansas. I will say I kind of am hesitant to call this a trap game for Memphis because it is also their conference opener. And Memphis is competing for a conference championship this year. They want to win the American again. They want to get back to that summit that they have not been able to reach as of late. And so I think this is a game where they're going to come out playing well because they have to play well. The thing that scares me about this team is 2 weeks ago when FAU struggled running the football or struggled to stop the run against FIU, Memphis has as good a running game as anyone in the country. They're like top 5 or top 10 in rushing success. They have 2-3 running backs that they like. They've got a quarterback who can run the ball in Brandon Lewis. They've got a lot of different ways that they can beat you on the ground. And with the way FAU struggled a week ago, that is definitely a concern because they have not figured out a way to stop the run, or at least we haven't seen them find a way to stop the run consistently while also playing good defense. And so if you let Memphis just sort of get what they want on the ground, this is going to be a difficult matchup for FAU. And it's going to be one that may be a long Saturday night in Boca. On the other side of things, that's a good defense. That's a defense that just got done holding Arkansas to a pretty marginable or manageable game. And they made Taylon Green, one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC, look kind of pedestrian. And so I'm a little bit concerned about Kane Veldkamp because he needs to go out there and put together a performance not against FAMU, but against a conference opponent, an opponent in the FBS level. And right now he just hasn't done that. And so I'm a little interested to see how he looks on Saturday, because I think that's the biggest question mark is what does he look like? How much did the bye week help him? Then on defense, of course, it's just finding a way to stop the run.
And now I want to talk about Memphis's rush defense. I feel like it's back-to-back weeks where you're taking on a team in which one of their specialties is having a solid rush defense. And for Memphis, and for the case of Memphis, they only give up, on average, just over 95 yards a game, which is third best in the American, only behind East Carolina and our Naval Academy. So Sands has, at times, really had to carry the offense. But how much work do you think he's going to have to do, and what needs to go right for not just the running game, but I guess the offensive line, for that matter, against one of the most fierce rush defenses in the American?
They have to find a way to manage and continue to manage on the ground, because they don't need an explosive running attack. They just need a running attack that they can rely on, one that it doesn't require them to manufacture touches through screens and through RPOs and stuff that can serve the same purpose but isn't the same thing. And I think that FAU just needs to, whether it's Jamari Sands, Xavier Terrell, someone else, right? Like they need to find a way to let Caden Veldkamp manage in third and manageable, not third and long all the time, and get him to 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 6, even where it's not an easy conversion, but they're not so far behind the sticks that everything is a difficult task, and you take away the rushing game and you'll just allow defensive ends and defensive tackles to tee up and try and rush you. And so the biggest question mark for me is, can they find a way to put together a consistent game from that sense? Because this is a really tough defensive matchup. This is a good rush defense, as you mentioned. But FAU needs to find something, because they can't keep struggling on the ground as the season continues. That's going to put them behind the 8 ball in every game in the American this year.
Now, on the other side of that, how does FAU's defense stop a guy like Sutton Smith? So far this season, he's been absolutely ridiculous. 394 yards, 5 touchdowns, averaging 7 yards a carry at this point. How do you contain him?
I wish I had an answer, because if I had an answer, I think I'd give that answer to Zach Kitley, Brett Dewhurst, and everyone involved, because he looks like one of the best running backs in the country right now. And he's got power. He's got some speed. He can make big plays. He can find chunk plays, but he can also grind it out and get you 3-4 yards and really tire out a defense. And it's not just Sutton Smith. It's also Brandon Lewis, who I look at their quarterback, the Nevada transfer, who has proven consistently that he can be a player on the ground and he can be a threat on the ground. And it's one thing to stop a good running back. It's another thing to stop a good running back with a good quarterback. And that's what Memphis has. And it's going to be a challenge to try and stop them. And truthfully, I don't know if you can stop them. I feel like it's more so a contain, keep it to 3rd and manageable, 3rd and long, where you have to force them to throw the football and get into the situations where they're not as comfortable. Because I don't think you're going to be talking about a game where they hold Memphis. I don't think anyone will, where they hold Memphis to 3.5 yards per carry, 3.6 yards per carry, and it's easy.
Yeah.
I think it's hoping that you can hold them long enough where you can find other ways to beat them. and that's getting them to third and long-ish situations where they have to throw the football.
And now let's talk about something that's unfortunately not great with Florida Atlantic's defense. They don't have a single interception yet this season. I feel like if you really want to slow down this Memphis offense and Brendan Lewis specifically at the quarterback, you got to get your first turnover or two in this game. But what's your take on that? How important do you think it'll be for this Owls defense to finally get some turnovers via interceptions against one of the better offenses?
You got to get some luck on your side, right? Like their luck has to turn eventually. And, to some degree, they haven't been the best positions, but they've also had situations where they've been the best position and interceptions just haven't come. Like, it's just been a tough day at the office from that sense, but they need luck on their side because turnovers, while they're not indicative of a good defense, they do certainly help out in offense. It's a lot easier to score a touchdown if you've got to drive 35 yards than 70 yards. So they need to get some turnovers. They need to get some luck. They need to get some sacks, some big plays on defense. Right now, they haven't gotten enough of that, and they need to find a way to get that because that's how you set up your offense to score points. It's when they have to punt the ball from their own 15 or 10-yard line, or you turn the ball over near midfield, or whatever the case may be. Defense has to help the offense. Special teams has to help the offense, and vice versa. The offense has to find ways to sustain drives because the defense has been tired a lot, especially in the second half against FIU. So those things kind of have to play together for FAU. They're still lacking a complete game from all three phases, and it's been an issue that needs to get corrected.
Yeah, definitely here. And you kind of mentioned this, only 4 sacks for the Owls, as opposed to the 11 sacks that the Tigers of Memphis have committed. So talk about how badly the offensive line for Florida Atlantic is going to need to give Veldkamp time in the pocket this game. What are they going to need to do, especially to give this man some time to throw the ball?
I think they may need to start putting in a running back to block, start putting in tight end to block, and make it a 6-on-5 or 6-on-4 situation, because the issue has been that when you get to third and long, defenses can just tee up and they can just practice pass rush moves, and it's one-on-one matchups, and it's really difficult for any offensive line, especially an FAU one that is still trying to learn chemistry and learn each other. I think the way that they need to fix that, at least early on in this game, chip with tight ends, chip with running backs, leave them into block, give Caden Veldkamp that little half a second to make a play, because there have been plays down the field. They just always haven't worked, or they haven't been consistent. And right now, I think that's the biggest thing holding them back.
That the 11 sacks, by the way, for Memphis puts them in top 3 alongside ECU and Rice. Florida Atlantic near the bottom, unfortunately, with sacks that they've forced so far in the American, to be specific. So, all right, we've talked a bit about the matchup. What does – and it's crazy that they're at home, but I still need to ask this question. What does Florida Atlantic need to do right to make sure not only that they stay in this game with Memphis early, but to pull off the upset at Flagler Credit Union Stadium?
Start fast. You got to start fast. You got to make this a game where you can turn it into a track meet against them, because FAU wants to live in a track meet. They want to make every game a track meet. They want to be able to run 90 plays and score points. You can't go down 14 points early and hope that you can do that still. You can't go down 2 possessions and hope you can turn it into a track meet. You have to find a way early on to turn this into a track meet. And I think that starts with the offense. It starts with Caden Veldkamp, Easton Messer, Assad Wasim, the wide receivers. Right? You have to find a way to put it all together, because right now you just haven't done that. And so I think you need to find that next step for the offense early on. I think the defense will figure itself out. I think Memphis will get their own. They're certainly a high-power, high-octane offense. I think it's the defense that needs to, or the offense that needs to step up and make plays early on, just to ease everything, just to give your defense a chance to play with a lead instead of having to play from behind all game, which has been an issue for them.
So you say track meet. So they're basically trying to be the 2023 Dolphins, which was the biggest track meet offense I've ever seen.
Yeah, they're trying to play fast. They're trying to, run a lot of plays, put you in tough positions. And again, you can't really do that if everything is starting from 3rd down, 4th down. or 3rd and long, right? And you have to continually try and get back into the huddle. You can't really play like that. That's not how FAU wants to play. And so they want to run 90 plays. That's the ideal spot, like 80, 85 plays. That's an ideal spot for them. And you can't do that if you're always playing from behind.
So I'll turn this over to you now, Mr. Fielder. You have to give a prediction, and nowhere in the contract did it say you have to pick Florida Atlantic in a game. But give us your score prediction, and if Florida Atlantic does pull it off, who would be your MVP?
Yeah, so I will say this before. I don't need FAU to win this game. This is not a game where I need FAU to win. I don't consider this a must-win game. I consider this a show-me-something game. Show me that there is improvements on both sides of the ball, especially on the offensive side of the ball. It's something I'm going to continue to watch until it gets fixed. And truthfully, right now, I don't think FAU can beat Memphis. This is a Memphis team that is playing really well this season. They've beaten every team that they've played by fairly comfortably, sans Arkansas, who they had to take to the wire, but they took to the wire. I am concerned about how FAU can manage against Memphis, but I think it will be closer than the 13.5 point spread that has sort of been put out there. I think FAU loses this game, but I think they show something on offense. I think they show that they can hang with teams at the top, which is all I'm really looking for. I have Memphis winning 38-28, a 10-point loss for FAU, but it's one that's encouraging. It's one that gives you a reason to continue to hope that things get better. As for if they were to win the game, I think the MVP would be Kevin Veldkamp, as cliche as it is, because it would mean that they put together an offensive performance that you can like.
Well, with the supposed loss, the Owls would fall to 1-3 to start this season. And at that point, I know you take on teams like Rice, like some, I wouldn't say cupcakes, but definitely some winnable games here and there. But how confident are you that they can actually get to 6 in Kitley's first year?
The schedule doesn't get any easier. Let's be clear. They have to play Navy.
Right.
They have to play a Rice team that looks pretty good. They have to play South Florida. They have to play ECU and Tulane, like good football teams. I could go down their entire schedule, but like if they look good against Memphis and they have moments, I would feel confident about them being able to steal 1 or 2 of those games.
Yeah.
And get in a position where it's not like you're in the final 3 games of the season, you need to win all 3. I think you need to get to those final 3 or 4 games. You got to win 2 of them, because I think that makes you feel a lot more comfortable, especially when in the final 3 games you have a UConn team that is certainly beatable. You have an ECU team that's certainly beatable. You want to get in a position where those are the games that you can figure out a way to win.
Do you think the American title game is almost a lock at this point to feature Memphis and South Florida, or do you see a bit more parity than that?
I think it's going to be Tulane and Memphis. I think those 2 are the best 2 teams in the conference.
Okay.
I also wouldn't count out Navy. I think Navy continues to look good and continues to play well. They've got a senior quarterback, which is an incredibly important thing to have in a triple option offense. So I think it'll be one of those 3 or 2 of those 3 teams. South Florida as well, right? Like I can't count them out yet. They certainly did not look good against Miami, but I think it'll be Memphis and Tulane with Navy as the 3rd place team and USF a very close 4th.
What happened to Army, man? They were such a great, fantastic team.
Their quarterback graduated. It's the only
Simple.
thing that the kiss of death for triple option teams.
I got you. Alrighty then, Kevin. So again, thanks for talking, and we thank you all for watching the latest episode of the Shula Bowl podcast. Next week we'll be back right at it as FIU gets ready to take on UConn over at East Hartford, and then the Owls head to Houston to take on Rice. But until then, thank you for watching episode 127 of the Shula Bowl Pod.